Welcome to Real Estate Investing Unscripted, a podcast from Fund That Flip, where we explore some of the most creative, innovative, and inspiring stories from the real estate investor community. With expert tips and success stories you won't hear anywhere else, you'll come away with inspiration on how to improvise in the unscripted world that is real estate investing, so that you can dominate your next real estate deal. Now your host, founder and CEO of Fund That Flip, Matt Rodak.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Real Estate Investing Unscripted. I'm your host, Matt Rodak, founder and CEO of Fund That Flip. And today on the show, we have Gary Boomershine of realestateinvestor.com. Gary is a software engineer turned consultant turned entrepreneur who has successfully built 4 companies, reaching the elusive Inc. 500 fastest growing company list multiple times, while also being married for 25 years now to his wife and fathering 2 daughters. And I'm sure if we ask Gary of all of the challenges, probably the child rearing would be the most challenging and also most fulfilling. But with that, welcome to the show, Gary.
It is awesome to be here, Matt. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I'm finding here in California, but super excited about today, and especially for all of us, right? We're all working in this sort of new world post-COVID, and I love sharing kind of what's working and what I'm finding, and so this could be a lot of fun, and hopefully I can deliver a tremendous amount of value back to your loyal listeners.
I'm sure you will. So let's get to it then, Gary. I think the thing I like most about real estate investors is the path that most take to get there. So would love to hear from you, kind of your journey through the real estate investing world and kind of how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this brief, and I'll try to make it full of sort of nuggets. I love sharing my experience primarily so that a lot of it is learning through mistakes, and I love sharing and helping other people so they don't have to repeat the same mistakes that I have. And that's what I'm super passionate about. But I've been, I just turned 51. In fact, I'm going to have my 26th wedding anniversary to my bride
Congratulations.
Tomorrow. So
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. But I grew up in a entrepreneurial family in real estate. And it's really funny. I was actually speaking on stage in front of 400 people and shared this, but I was a licensed agent 3 weeks after turning 18, and actually paid for college by holding open houses and door knocking and cold calling. And we also had rental properties. And so I learned a lot of the, how to actually manage properties. And more than anything, I learned what I love and what I don't love. I love closing deals. I really don't like all the back end work. And but I ended up going down a little bit of a different path. I ended up going, because I'm right here in the heart of Silicon Valley. I ended up getting a computer engineering degree, and I went off and worked in the Silicon Valley, high tech consulting and then software startup world. So when I got out of college, I got recruited to a huge, actually it was the number one largest technology and management consulting firm in the world. It's called Accenture, used to be Anderson Consulting. And it was awesome. I had really great experience, except it was 80-hour weeks working inside of a building and never actually seeing the sunshine. And my wife and I then decided I'm going to get out of consulting, swapping money for time, and get into sales. So I went into super high ticket, what's called enterprise software sales. It's the $500,000 to $5 million software that you sell via a CD, right? You have to be really good at like explaining stuff that you can't actually see. And I did that for 4 technology companies, one that went public. I was employee 12, and ultimately ended up getting bought by IBM, which is now part of like a $8 billion division of IBM. But I'll tell you, man, I learned a lot. I really learned how to sell, specifically solution selling, which is building relationships, building trust, and coming up with a solution to someone's problem. And I want to give that as a nugget, because if you can do that with sellers and buyers and raising money, you make a fortune in this business. And I think most people do what's called transaction selling, which is actually not, it's not a best practice even in real estate. So we can talk a little bit about that. but it was 2004. I think that year I had 180,000 miles on United alone.
Wow.
And so I was never home, and it was no life. We had 2 babies. I had a 4-year-old and a 2-month-old. And I read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the concept of becoming wealthy, which is when your passive income is greater than your expenses off of real estate. And the light bulb went off, and my wife and I literally, she left her job. I quit my job, and we went real estate full time with a $700,000 mortgage and a 2-month-old and a 4-year-old. I would never recommend that, by the way, to anybody. Lesson learned. That's a very risky strategy. But that was in 2004. I never looked back. My first deal, which might be one I share with you today, but I knew that this business was right for me because the first deal, I actually drove 5 hours. I'm up here near San Francisco. I drove 5 hours to Bakersfield and just knew the seller was motivated. I knew there was equity, and I knew I'm going to go down and buy this property. And ultimately, I made $181,000 on that first deal. I did one thing right. It was around the negotiation. I actually ended up getting a huge discount from the bank. And that's a funny story in and of itself, but it was a great relationship with the seller and a great story I love to share. And I do that on stage of how to build relationships and trust and great deals. But anyway, we launched, and I've fast forward. So that was in 2004. I took a little bit of my background and some of my team overseas, and I've gotten really good at finding off-market deals. So I built way back, it's been around now for a decade, but realestateinvestor.com is a software plus the team of resources to basically make it easy and take all the brain damage out of a lot of real estate for us, which means, managing, bringing in the leads, a follow-up system that does all the automated follow-up with the right words at the right time to the seller, and then a dedicated phone team and a direct mail and a cold calling team that can do all of this for a lot of our members. And so that's what realestateinvestor.com is. It's really, at the end of the day, most of us just want to be in front of sellers and just want to be in front of buyers when they're ready. And so that was a passion of mine and gotten really good at it. We now have 100 people on the staff. But I'm still very active in real estate. I don't like to beat the horn. I'm not a super high volume guy, but I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of transactions. I love creative deals. I do some wholesaling, but I'm really good at picking up kind of the more creative deals. And I also do a ton of lending and also coaching. I've loved coaching some of our students and helping them. So anyway, that's a little bit of my background. I love real estate, especially right now, Matt. This is going to be one of the greatest transfers of wealth that we've seen in history, much greater than 2008 with what's coming. And this is a really good time. What we're on my podcast and what we've been sharing is right now is what I call the 3 Ps, which is you want to protect, you want to pivot, and you want to profit. And be prepared for what's going on right now in the market, but preparing for an incredible opportunity in real estate that's coming our way. Because this it's like a tsunami where people are sitting there looking at the sand and the water's going out, and they're looking at the fish on the sandbar saying, "Oh, look at all the fish." No, there's a tsunami coming. Yep. We're going to see a massive a number of distressed properties. And I do think we're going to see some changes, but with what's going on, we're going to see massive inflation, and we're going to all want to ultimately own properties for the long haul. So we can talk about that a little bit later, but that's my background.
Yeah, that's cool. So I want to double click on a couple of things here, and I'll try to go in order that I was taking some notes down a little bit. So you mentioned you got into sales and you really learned how to solution sell and, solve people's problems. Talk to us a little bit more, if you would, just kind of on how you've applied, selling $500,000, I like how you said CDs, right? Back in the day when, you had to actually, load software onto computers and, how you translated that, hey, here's why you should buy this CD, effectively the solution for $500,000 into your real estate business, and some tips maybe that some folks can pick up on.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll make it even better. I will actually give everybody, I'm working on, this has been on my bucket list for a decade. People have been asking, but I am building an advanced, I call it my revolutionary sales training program and compression coaching. And it's a 1-month course, hardcore, teaching people how to actually get massive results around converting with sellers, doing everything to beat out their competition and not having to worry about price and just coming in with a lowball cash offer. And I will give everybody on this call, if you'd like, I'll give you guys one of the modules that I'll share right now for free. And I just love feedback because we're getting ready to launch this in a handful of weeks. And I'm doing it we're going to give it to all of our members just because, right now, converting sellers the market has turned a little bit. But I'll kind of, there's two types of sales models, fundamental sales models. There's what's called transaction selling, and then there's solution selling. And almost everybody, most of the gurus and most of the people that are really not having massive success today, they do what's called transaction selling. And that's typically low price products, typically $10,000 products or less. And it's usually high pressure and high pressure sales. And it's kind of like if you gotta get the deal or you move on. All right. And solution selling is more about building the relationship, creating trust, and coming up with a solution to a seller's problem and getting paid handsomely for that. And it is much more around the trust component and slowing things down a little bit. And so I teach that. I'll give you an example. Transaction selling. It's like, a lot of people that do cold calling for, stuff that people buy over the phone, even coaching, timeshares. It's usually high pressure transaction selling. Mm-hmm. Car dealerships are the same way, where it's like, hey, somebody shows up, and if you don't get them to sign that day, the chances are you're going to lose them. And that for high ticket stuff, which is real estate, right? In real estate, where we're talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, that's an emotional decision. Mm-hmm. And a couple things, people buy or sell an emotion, and then they justify it with facts. Yep. And that is a key nugget. The second thing is people buy and sell to people that they like, trust, and respect. And so there's a component. One of the things I teach is a simple sales process. I've been using it. I did not invent this. I've had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of professional training over the years and some of the large corporations. And we just apply this in real estate, and it massively differentiates us. And I teach my sales team and other people. But I'll give you an example. A lot of people, they go in and they're trying to get to the price and make an offer to the seller, a lowball offer, single offer, and then they wonder why they're not having success. And instead, you need to understand there's actually what's called the motivational price curve. Not all sellers are motivated yet. And the key is yet. The other thing is, most people in this business are looking for the perfect unicorn, motivated seller lead. And it doesn't exist. There's no perfect mailing list. You can get better results. Don't get me wrong, but people are always chasing shiny objects. And so one of the things that I teach that everybody that's done this, and by the way, all the big players agree with this too, by the way, if you're in any masterminds, almost all the 7 and 8-figure multi-million-dollar companies that are wholesaling or, buying, they're all doing this. And that is that you just assume all leads suck until you start interacting with them. And the key is in the follow-up. So here's a simple fact. 90% of all profits in real estate come after the 6th interaction. And less than 10% of anybody follows up more than twice. So people, when they embrace that, they understand, hey, all the leads that come in, they're not motivated yet. We have to interact with them. And you just slow down the process and build a follow-up process and engage. Because some sellers, they're not ready, not motivated. And I talked about this motivational price curve. What happens is, imagine over time, if we had wish I could show this. I do this on a slide in my training, but you got time, right? And then you got price. Mm-hmm. And the sellers typically, when you first engage with them, especially if we're like sending out marketing to them, or we're cold calling them, or door knocking, usually they're not motivated yet. And then over time, they go to reasonable, then they go to motivated, then they go to super motivated. Okay. And what happens is if you're talking to a seller and they're not ready to sell yet, and you're already coming in and talking about a price, you may have destroyed the deal and teed up your competitor. So somebody will come in and, let's say, as an example, you're going to go into contract on this deal at $200,000. That's your maximum allowable offer. Well, at the beginning stage, the seller may want $350,000. They may want $1 million. They may not want any money because they're not ready. Mm-hmm. And so so what I teach is slow it down. You have to understand where the seller's at, and sometimes make a range. And so I'll give you a perfect example. I love this story. His name is Justin Shirthy. He lives in Spokane. He's a 22-year-old kid. He was in college last year listening to my podcast and finally decided to jump into real estate. And so he's on deal number 10. And I actually recorded this because we met him in Coeur d'Alene a couple of weeks ago. And I got a story on video. It was awesome. But he said, gosh, Gary, I really didn't know the business. So I just did what you told me to do. And he said, I had this lead come in December. And he said that I finally got the guy back. He goes, well, you guys actually found the lead for me. You guys did the direct mail. And then our phone team finally got the guy back on the phone in January. And so Justin just interacted with him and didn't talk price, just, asked him about, his property and what his plans were. This guy, actually, it was an inherited property. The owner lived in Florida. And then they just talked and found out that, the seller loved Justin because they talked about music, because Justin is a kind of a musician, and talked about college. Well, anyway, he ended up continuing to interact with this guy ongoing, and he ended up getting the property into contract. He should make somewhere between $70,000 and $80,000. Wow. On this one deal. And he said, all I did is it's just a conversation, just like you taught. And you just interacted with him. And it was when the seller was ready, he goes, I even, there's a rule of sales. He or she who speaks first loses. And so I always teach, here's a process to get the seller to give you their number, as opposed to you telling them the number. And so Justin said, he asked the seller, gosh, Mr. Seller, what would you be happy with? What would be the least that you'd be willing to take where I could actually still make some profit? And the seller gave him the number. And Justin ran the math. He's like, yeah, I can do this deal. And it was a lot lower than what he would have actually offered. And so anyway, slow it down. I absolutely believe in making offers, but you want to slow it down, because some people come in and they'll make an offer for, say, $200,000. The seller's not ready yet. And a week later or 2 weeks later, somebody else comes into that same deal and takes it right out from under you for $1,000 or $2,000 more. And so there is a trick of slowing it down, understand where the seller's at. Follow-up is absolutely key. Yep. And especially if you have a team or automation like realestateinvestor.com to do it, if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, I love this idea of solution selling. And I think it's, you nail it right on the head. And I think a lot of people have this idea in their mind of what a salesperson is, right? And it scares a lot of people even away from wanting to be in sales, because they don't like this idea of tricking someone, right? I'm going to trick this person out of this into the sale, right? And it's right. As a professional salesperson, I know that's not what sales is. Sales is really getting to, what problem does this person have? And do I have a solution for it? And if I do, we can do business. If I don't, we can both go our separate ways. But oftentimes it takes a lot of time and conversations and touch points to actually uncover what that problem is.
Yeah. And you know what, Matt, let me share this with everybody, all the listeners. And real in the very first module of the course, I share this. There are no perfect words or gimmicks or perfect script that is going to convince a seller to do anything. In all the years that I've been doing this, the other thing is sales. You have to talk to people more than anything else. You've got a TTP. You got to talk to people. If you're not talking to sellers, there's no money in this business.
Yep.
And so a lot of people, and here's the thing, the biggest fear that people have in this business is the fear of rejection, especially men. And so many people that I talk to, they're spending all their time in the wrong places and don't even realize that it's just a fear of rejection. Sales does not start until you get a rejection. So if you don't get a rejection and you just get a yes from a seller, just realize all you are is an order taker. You're not selling. So what do we do with that? Sales is not the perfect script. It is just a conversation, and you have to do it. And the other thing is sales is being 75% of being a great salesperson is actively listening, followed by sharing stories. So 75%. Most novice salespeople, they talk, right? And one of the kiss of death is when somebody says, "Oh, you're a great salesperson," because what they're saying is, "No, you're talking. That's not a great salesperson. A great salesperson is a great listener. They can share stories. They can." I call it the RAPID model. That's an acronym. It's a very simple thing. I do it on every call. RAPID. I won't go into it. I'll actually give everybody a free module on this, but it's RAPID is resolve differences quickly. When I interact with the seller, I actually create what's called a disruption. It's an interrupt, disruptive sales. So I want to transfer power back to me on every conversation I have with the seller with a simple sentence. The A is set a simple agenda. Like, "Gosh, Mr. Seller, do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" And then you'll probably provide me some answers. I'll ask a few more questions and it'll be fun. And I'll be able to get you an offer and more information about us. P is probe for pain. I is investigate the solution together. And D is a decision to sell to me. And that process can be followed. It's simple and it can be scripted, but it doesn't need to be scripted. I actually give like my exact formula of what I say to a seller. And then I have everybody, hey, put it in your own words. Every one of us is a little different, and just be human. Sellers are human people. Remember, they sell on emotion. They justify it with facts, right? Yep. That's where the price and who you are and your background becomes important. Not at the beginning. It becomes important after you've really kind of like agreed to go into contract.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah,
some great nuggets in here, and we'll get some links here on our blog post where you can follow up with Gary on these modules he's talking about, because it sounds like there's a lot more to unpack than we've got time to do here today. But certainly appreciate you making us aware of these resources that you've put together out there. So some stuff to follow up on here for sure. So let's get into shift gears a little bit here, and it's October 7th as of this recording, right? We're about 8-ish months into the COVID experience, as I'm calling it now, right? So I'd love to hear from you, kind of, what your thoughts are. You've been in the game for some time. You're super plugged into a lot of different investors around the country. What are you seeing, or what do you expect to happen, or what are some things that maybe our listeners should just be keeping their ear to the ground on going forward in the next, call it 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I'm seeing people right now. The market is still incredibly hot in most areas. I know, our house, as an example, has gone up over $100,000 since COVID started. It's insane. And we're selling a property that we own in Maui. And that actually has gone up in the middle of a crisis where you can't really even go over to Maui right now. And so most of my peers were connecting. We were still seeing a very hot market. Interest rates are low. Stimulus is out there. But I will tell you, we see a coming change. The success right now that I'm seeing people having is to not panic and be watching all the what I call fear porn on TV. This is not a time to pause, but it is a time to, like for instance, there were people that we saw like start to panic and exit out of the business. It was, we do a lot of direct mail. Most of us were doubling it down. We were actually spending more time and marketing because a lot of people weren't. And so it's been phenomenal for us. A lot of people say direct mail doesn't work. All of us big players and even the small players are having incredible success if you do it right. I'm loving virtual wholesaling right now. I like not taking on a tremendous amount of risk. I think people that are actually doing big rehab projects may be in harm's way because just like other market changes and cycle changes, which we're at that peak. We're definitely beyond that peak of what we call the euphoric stage in real estate. And so most of the smart money right now is on the sidelines. They are doing some fix and flip. If the deals make sense, the rental properties, if you're holding a portfolio and the numbers make sense and you can actually maintain profitability for the next, 24 months, we're seeing those are good. I'm still picking up properties, mostly creative, where the owners are willing to do some financing and we're getting great terms. But I love virtual wholesaling, and specifically,
what is virtual wholesaling? Maybe just give us.
Oh, virtual wholesaling means we're actually not necessarily having to even go out and see the property. We can do it remotely. So a lot of us are able to do wholesaling, wholeteling, which means we're also picking these properties. It's really, we're assigning the properties quickly. So we're getting them under contract and then we're turning them without a lot of risk. And that's been working really, really well. I think the people that are actually trying to acquire right now, most of them are acquiring in a peak market. We think that there's, across the country, we think there's going to be over probably the next 12 to 18 months, a decrease in most of the areas. The center part of the country, what we call kind of the flat markets, like Omaha, Nebraska, where they didn't have much of a decrease in 2008. Those are good markets. They probably won't drop as much. But if we're on the coastal areas, we see a decrease, 10 to 20%, 25% in some areas, maybe even more in the short term. A lot more foreclosures. They're ultimately going to go back to the bank. So that means a lot more supply on the market, followed by, in 18 to 24 months, a massive increase in value through inflation because of the massive printing of money. That's a natural thing where everything goes up. And that's when we ultimately want to be in real estate. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. I'm in 4 markets. We're actively marketing. We've got a lot of people at realestateinvestor.com are having, I've got a lot of people, this is their best year ever. A lot of people. I would just talk to Eric Clark. He's in Fargo. They've had their best year ever since COVID started. Jeff Cohn, who was the number 1 team with Berkshire Hathaway, they bought 70 houses in COVID.
Yeah. Transactions are still happening. So if I could summarize, so you think that near term, it makes a lot of sense to be patient, get in and out of stuff quick, be ready for, some additional opportunities, call it in the next 12-ish months, and then go hard into what could be an inflationary environment called 18 to 24 months. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. Also, learn if you do not have capital, you want to learn how to raise private money. I always tell people you want to raise money when you don't need it. And if you're doing it right, you never have to ask for the money. But this is a really, really good time to be preparing for a massive transfer of wealth and life-changing, probably even generational wealth for many of us. Every one of these major cycles, there is a transfer of wealth from one group to another. And I think most of us, I couldn't imagine being in a better space than real estate right now going into this market. There are going to be people that are buying retail, commercial properties. They're going to get hammered. And there are people that are still doing heavy rehabs and heavy teams, and I think they're gonna be hit hard too for the most part. Rehabs meaning they're going in and they're knocking down walls and spending 6 to 9 months on these projects and doing new construction. I think that's where the market has some major risk.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. So there you have it, Gary's predictions for the next 12 to 18 months. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how things play out. I'm excited. I think the thing that I like about real estate, right, is you can make money in any market, up or down, right? You just gotta make sure you're not operating too emotionally and looking at facts and data and everything else that's out there, right?
Absolutely. I'll give a couple of other just little tips. People have said this has been really helpful, especially for those of you that are smaller teams and you feel like you're working way too hard. Learning the real estate business is a finance game, and it's all about leverage. So a lot of people know how to leverage other people's money, but you also want to leverage other people's time. And here is the huge hot button. Most of us got in this business for financial freedom and actually having a life. And a lot of people basically became a slave to their business. They're trying to do everything, but here's the nugget. And that is, you got to know the value of your time. And if you're running a real estate business, right? I'm not talking about you're a passive investor, but if you're running a flipping business, or, this is a major part of your business life, you're a CEO, and all businesses need a CEO. And if you're doing $10 an hour work, you're going to have a $10 bank account. And so you want to learn how to leverage other people's time, other people's resources and experience, and trying to save pennies and nickels that are costing you $1,000, $100 to $1,000 bills is not a best practice. It's how most people fail in this business. Yep. So really learning how to invest in systems and invest in marketing and the people to do that $10 an hour work. Because the money in this business is in one area, that's talking to people, talking to the sellers, making those offers, and then raising money and building a great team.
Yep. I think it's a great point. And that's a common theme that I see too when I talk to successful investors is they're not spending time going to Home Depot to pick supplies up, right? They've figured out a process for someone else to do that. I don't know if you're familiar with Jay Scott. He's written a couple books on the subject. We had him on early. And he famously tells a story of, one of his projects needed like a 39-cent bolt, right? And he had it delivered, right? It was like $100 delivery charge. He's like, that made sense, right? Like it didn't make any sense for me to go pick up that bolt or someone from my team to go pick up that bolt when I can have someone deliver it for $100. And it's an extreme example, but I think something that kind of hammers that point home, right?
Yeah.
So let's shift gears again, right? The theme of the show is Real Estate Investing Unscripted. We all know that, no matter how much we plan or run the numbers, there's always gonna be something that just kind of pops up that was unexpected. Would love to hear from you, Gary. You've done hundreds of transactions, and it sounds like maybe you had some stories here even from your first one. But what was kind of a story that you have that thought you had a good plan going in, and then you got punched in the face, if you will, and what did you learn, and how have you kind of taken that lesson and applied it to your business going forward?
Oh, goodness. That's, I got lots of them. let me think of a couple. Let's see. What I have found is the money is all made on the front end. It is on the getting the right deal. And, I want to tell a couple stories. I'm very heavy targeting off-market sellers, which means we have to go to them. And they're not on the MLS. So that's my little mouse trap with direct mail and cold calling, et cetera. So early on, what I found is I ended up getting a voicemail from a seller. He was a seller. I sent him a postcard years ago. It was the angriest caller I've ever had, even to this day. I mean, it was like even threats. And I want to share this because I've repeated this, and I know that other people that have followed this as well. But his name was Dwight, lived here in California, and literally every bad, foul language, including felt like he wanted to kill me. So I called him back, and remember, most of us have fear of rejection. So I know probably 99.9% of the investors out there they throw these leads away. So I called him back, and I said, he goes, "Who is this?" And I said, "I'm probably the last guy on the entire planet you want to hear from." And he said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm the guy that sent you that postcard." And man, he just went off. And I just sat there and listened and said, I am really sorry, Dwight. I am really sorry. I'm really sorry. I am really sorry. And once he heard that like 10 times, and I let him like really, really vent, I said, Dwight, I have a very specific skill set. And I said, and you don't know me. I'm really sorry about the postcard, but how would you have wanted me to introduce myself to you? I'm like, should I have waited outside to have you come grab your newspaper? Should I have run my shopping cart into yours at a supermarket, or maybe hired somebody to deliver like a gift? Like, what would you have recommended? I said, because I have a very specific skill set on something I think that you might need. And so anyway, he opened up and laughed. And he goes, I'm just going through a lot, man. It really is not you. He totally opened up. Well, the reason I share this is I bought 2 houses from him, and I made $241,000 net on these 2 properties. See, what happened was the angrier these people are, it's not us. They have a problem. And the angrier they are, it's usually they have a family issue. Maybe maybe they inherited the property, because that's something that we do for our clients is target those inherited properties. So maybe they're fighting over money or what have you. Well, his wife was in jail. He was going through an ugly divorce, and his wife was in jail for embezzlement. And he had $1 million lien on the 2 houses that were pretty much free and clear. So the lesson from that was the angry callers are fantastic leads. Yeah. If you come in with the right approach. And I've got hundreds. I think another one was I bought an apartment in Sacramento, and I did get a good deal on it, but I ended up didn't have the right property manager right from the get-go. And remember, I'm good at the front end, and I didn't get the property manager. The thing turned into an absolute complete meth lab in like less than 6 weeks. Not great. And this is the leverage of other people, right? And bringing in the right people. I'm like, well, I'm going to learn it a little bit myself. I kind of kept the existing property manager on site. And so if you're on the real estate game on apartments, I realized it's really having the right team. I ended up unloading that property. My wife and I lost $120,000 on that deal. This is back in 2013. And so that was a huge one. And then my very first seller actually died. I was the one giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. I've told that story many times. And so everyone's like, well, gosh, I've never even heard something like that. But yes, I was on a rafting trip with the seller because we became really good friends, and he literally had a massive heart attack. And I was the one that was trying to revive him. It was crazy. But yeah, there you go.
never a dull moment in real estate investing. That is for sure.
Yeah.
I joke all the time. We could write books about the stories of deals and people we've had encounters with in this business.
Yeah.
It's never boring.
It isn't. And what I learned is the things that have really changed my life in this business is, number one is having really good coaches, CEO coaches, that will, there's no professional sports musician that doesn't have a coach. You want to have I have 4 coaches in my life, CEO coaches, real estate coaches, et cetera. The second is be with like-minded people. I'm a huge fan of being in masterminds. I'm in 8 of them. And then the last is you want to be, I follow the Traction EOS process. In fact, we have a coaching program that helps people do that in the real estate niche. But Traction has changed my life because it is an accountability model for building a business and staying focused. Because most people are running, like their hair's on fire. Mm-hmm. And because most of us are entrepreneurs, but you want to build a model that works for scale, and so. Those are the 3 things that have changed my life.
That's really good stuff. Well, listen, Gary, really appreciate your time. I think some a ton of great nuggets here, and I think quite a few more things to double click on, and we'll make sure we get in our post here online some of these additional resources that you can follow up on if you're listening at home. But if I could just summarize maybe some of the key points of the show, I think this distinction between solution selling and transaction selling, and ask yourself, if you are listening, which one are you doing? Are you coming right in with a price and running hard at people and then moving on too quickly? Or are you really taking the time to understand the problem and build the relationship and let the seller get through the journey that they need to get through in their time and on their terms to make a deal that works for everybody. So I think that's a super important one and something I know I'm passionate about and how we train our sales team as well. So probably a lot of good books and other resources, and we'll obviously get Gary's module up around solution selling, but something I think we can all probably do better at. The second one that I had that I wrote down here was the 3 Ps, the kind of where we're at right now: protect, pivot, and profit. We talk a lot about of being in this COVID environment of a lot of volatility and uncertainty, right? So protecting what you have, but also being ready to pivot and having a perspective on how the world may shift over the next couple of months, and being ready to take what the market gives, I think is super, super important. And then the last one that I absolutely love too, and we talked a lot about sales here, is this idea that people buy on emotion. Real estate, I think, is a super emotional business, partially because it's people's homes, but also because of the amount of dollars in the stakes at play, right? So understanding that and also understanding the other thing you said, which I think is, I don't know, maybe it's Dale Carnegie, right? People buy from people they like, know, and trust, right? So kind of goes with that solution selling, taking the time to build that trust. So, and then maybe the last one, I guess I got 4 points here, is real estate is a leverage game. There's the finance piece, but also the time piece, which is huge, and something I even struggle with running a company is, should I actually be doing this or should someone else be doing this? Right. Which is good stuff. What do you think, Gary? Did I miss anything? Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, the only one is, I'll give this out because I promised it to everybody. You'll actually see even how our software works. We're not going to market to you. This is just, I have a link I have a phone number. You can text message this and it will give you, and I'm going to ask you to put something very specific in the text. So I can give you at least one of the free modules on my new program, the sales course. And so you'll just text this number and put, I'm going to have you put unscripted. Just put unscripted in the text. I want to know that all of you, that I promised this. And so I'm going to tell my team, but you'll get a text within maybe 4 or 5 minutes. This is the same solution that we use, realestateinvestor.com, for text messaging sellers. So as leads come in, but you can text this number. I know you'll put it in the show notes, 925-320-0575. So 925-320-0575. Just send a text and put unscripted in the however you want in the message, and we'll put you on the list to get you back. And I have a bunch of free gifts in there. I did a large presentation. I set this up for them right before COVID, and so I'm going to use the same thing. There's like a bunch of free stuff that I've done. There's a marketing guide, like everything that we've learned on direct mail. After doing 65 million pieces of direct mail. So there's a guide on like what to do, what not to do, little tricks and techniques that have really changed the response and the conversion off of that I think people could use. And so also leverage tools, et cetera.
Awesome. Really, really appreciate all the value you brought and offering up some of these additional resources. So again, number is 925-320-0575. We'll get it in the show notes. Text unscripted to that number to unlock some of these additional resources. I want to thank you again, Gary. Really appreciate you for coming on the show and sharing so much. Also check out realestateinvestor.com. Some cool solutions there for people that are really looking to scale up their business and apply some of these things we talked about around leveraging your time and making sure there's good teams around you. So check all that out. Thanks again, Gary. Thank you all for listening to this episode of Real Estate Investing Unscripted. Also check out our blog or to get funding for your next project over at fundthatflip.com. Otherwise, look forward to next time. Your host, Matt Rodak, signing off.